Well, tonight we are looking at a specific component of the work of apologetics that deals with the existence of God. Very often when someone raises an objection about Christianity, their primary objection is to the very existence of God. And so this is a good place to really start the specifics of our investigation of apologetics. Just to remind you, a quick review, apologetics is giving defense of the Christian faith. It has a twofold component. It means addressing objections and justifying the positive case that we're making for things having to do with Christian belief. So it has a defensive aspect in which people's misconceptions and misunderstandings about God and the Bible and Christian truth, those things are addressed and pointed out as being false. And also it has an offensive component, which means that we need to do the work of actually constructing the various warrants and justification for what we should believe. And so we're going to be tracking those things together, knowing that the work of apologetics, as I prayed, isn't merely winning an argument with someone about religious matters, but the goal of apologetics is evangelism, is that we remove barriers to belief, we highlight the goodness and reliability of what ought to be believed so that an individual can say yes to the good news of Jesus Christ. So, with all those things in mind, we'll look then specifically at arguments for the existence of God. Now, because this tends to be the first objection that people will throw up against Christian belief, very often it's a way that people who for various reasons aren't Christians, they'll say, I don't believe in God, because that puts believers on their heels. It's kind of an easy thing to just say. It takes just one sentence, just a few words, and somebody can blurt out, well, I don't even believe in God. And that often can communicate back up, back away from me. This is my final answer. And most Christians, including me, when we think, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to marshal 50 arguments to make a positive case for the existence of God, and I'm not sure how to do that, often we'll bow out of a discussion as soon as someone says, well, I don't even believe in God. But my experience is very often people who blurt out they don't believe in God have not thought very deeply about that conclusion. It is certainly not a rational conclusion that they've reached. Most, again, and I'm just giving you my anecdotal thoughts, but I think they match up with the testimony of many others. Most people's objection to the existence of God has to do with more non-rational issues that are going on. And so sometimes it's good to get clear on what they mean when they say that they don't believe in God. And so I've listed for you common misplaced objections to the existence of God. The first one is some people will say, I don't believe in God, and what they mean is, I don't believe in my straw man God. Are you familiar with the concept of a straw man argument? It's a particular kind of fallacious argument. A straw man argument is essentially this. I'm going to take a false construction of what you believe and set it up as a representative for what you believe, and then I'm going to knock my false version of what you believe. I'm going to knock that down, and that has disproven the existence of God. Now follow me? So instead of engaging what I or Christians actually believe about the God of the Bible, the one true and living God, people will come up with some very, very scaled down, incoherent, silly view of God. I don't believe that there's a large, white-bearded man up in the sky who throws lightning bolts at people who misbehave. Well, that's not what any of us in here believe. We don't believe that God is a large, white-bearded man up in the sky. If you do, catch me after this is over and we're going to talk a little bit. And so, but that's often, I won't get this exactly right, but one of the common tropes is the great spaghetti monster in the sky. Believing in God is like believing in a great spaghetti monster up in the sky. Well, that doesn't stand to reason. And that sort of, as I already said, very, very scaled down and anemic view of the Christian God is simply incorrect. And so a good question to ask when people say they don't believe in God, well, tell me a little bit about this God in whom you don't believe. What are some of your problems with the God that you say you don't believe in? What you may frequently find is that the God they don't believe in is the God you don't believe in either. The second misplaced objection is, and this is very common, they say, I don't believe in God, but what they mean is, I don't like the hurt that happened to me. And how could a good God, how could a real God exist and allow me to go through what I've been through? That's very common. Their real objection is an objection called the problem of evil. Why do bad things happen? And we're going to get to that in a few weeks, okay? But that's really a much more emotional and personal argument that needs ministry and care, but what they really are is they're mad at God. That's what's really going on. It's not that they don't believe in God, it's just they're mad at Him, and saying, I don't believe in you is a mean thing to say to a God who they think's been mean to them. A third objection is, I don't believe in God. What they really mean is, I don't like hypocrites. I've either had a bad experience in church, I grew up in a real tough environment where people said they believed in God out at church or out in the community, but at home it was a completely different story. Or Christians have misbehaved so badly in the past, the Crusades or the Inquisition. Well, I don't like hypocrites either, but guess what? They're everywhere, okay? And the universal human reality is all people fail to live up to their stated values. Even atheists, in fact, atheists have real trouble actually living up to the idea that there are no ultimate truths or values. They certainly behave like there are, all right? And so just because people fail to live out what they say they believe is not a knockdown argument for God's existence. And then the fourth one is, they'll say they don't believe in God, but what they really mean is they don't like anti-intellectualism. And do what now? That's a big word. It's a big word. Yes, indeed. Very often Christians have made the mistake of saying some particular third level component of doctrine is necessary to be a Christian. One example. Unless you believe that the universe is only 6,000 years old, you can't be a Christian. Well, we can have discussions about the age of the earth, and people hold very strong views and can make good cases for it. But I'm going to stand here as your pastor and say your particular view of how actually old the universe is, that's a debatable matter. That's a theological category called a debatable matter. But sometimes, even within the church, we have made people think that some of these things are zero-sum or binary. If you don't hold my particular view of the end times, you're not a Christian. And so, and I think especially people with a little bit of a scientific bent to their thinking, they're going to have some questions about molecules and quantum theory and that sort of thing, and they're going to struggle a little bit about how to get all of that to match up with the cosmogony that we find in the Bible. But what we want to run to, or I thought of another thing. I was talking with someone today. I just can't. Somebody will say, I just can't believe that a whale swallowed a man. And so all of Christianity is bunk, and belief in God is bunk. And sometimes what Christians will do is we're going to want to get into a discussion about the size of whales. And I would just encourage you to say, you know what, you're kind of at the periphery. Let's have a conversation about Jesus and the cross. All right? Because what's non-negotiable about Jesus and the cross and the empty grave?
He died.
All of that is non-negotiable, all right? If you don't think that Jesus rose again from the dead as a historical fact, you're not a Christian, okay? You can't be saved. That's it. The God we believe in is the God who raised Jesus Christ from the dead, okay? And so take them to that historical fact. And then, honestly, once you state that you believe God brought a dead man back to life, what's the big deal about saying God had a fish swallow a man for 3 days? Right? He can do anything he wants to do, and you can get there, but often we'll let things jump off the rails on an issue or a detail that doesn't have to do with whether or not somebody's going to be saved or lost. And so I had one of my deacons when I was serving in Oxford was a quantum physicist. Okay? He was brilliant, and he could go on about quarks and leptons and that sort of thing, and had some views about how old the universe was. But he was one of the finest Christians I've ever known, and believed in the essentials with all his heart, and gave clear, awesome testimony to the saving power of Jesus Christ alone on the campus of Ole Miss all the time. So I get my point. We can't get, people will often take some minuscule, non-essential aspect of Christianity and say, because I don't believe in that, I can't believe in the real message of the Scripture. Because the message of the Bible is not whales swallow men. All right? You read the Bible and you don't come away with that being the central claim. What's the central claim of the Bible? Jesus saves. You know, God loves you and sent a Savior to die and rise again for you. That's the central claim. And we'll get to some of the periphery later. Anyway, that's enough of that. Y'all got my point on that. So very often we have to sort of interrogate someone's claim that they don't believe in God. But many people have thought about and thought through some of the more essential aspects of God's existence, and they make more robust intellectual arguments against the existence of God. And so we're going to look at the 2 categories of these things. And I hope you had a cup of coffee, all right? Because we're gonna be getting after it a little bit. So put your thinking cap on. And I'm not going to be able, obviously, in about 50 minutes to just give you every detail of this that you would want to, but I want to introduce you to some ideas, maybe point you to some resources to get you reading and thinking, so this can stir a journey in your own life. And I also hope that what it will do for you is let you know that there are really smart Christian thinkers who've been doing good work for a lot of centuries, and there are awesome, powerful arguments to make for God's existence. And so when people make a claim, or when you hear some pundit on TV, you just dismiss the existence of God because science has explained everything. That is not, it's not only true, but it's not particularly smart. Okay? And I hit this, I found this today. So, how many of you are familiar with the movement called the New Atheist or New Atheism? This would be Dawkins, Daniel Dennett. Say, you have another name? Hitchens, Christopher Hitchens. Yes, no? I'm not getting a lot of love out there. Okay. For a while, there was a movement called New Atheism that was really dominant, probably from 2000 to now. Atheism was on the rise, and Sam Harris would be another one. Really bold and outspoken opponents of Christianity. Not only is Christianity wrong, not only are people wrong who believe in God, but they're bad. Actually making claims that Christianity is bad for the world. People who believe in God are the problem with the world. Really bold claims. But what has happened over about the last 3 or 4 years is New atheism is in a state of utter collapse. So much so that yesterday, Richard Dawkins, who was probably the godfather of the new atheists, he tweeted this tweet: there may be still something for me to learn about religion. And he's going to have a discussion with Ayaan Ali Hirsi. She was a Muslim who became an atheist who's just recently become a Christian. And they were friends and fellow co-laborers in the movement of New Atheism. And she's become a Christian. And many people who have claimed to be atheists are recognizing the weakness of atheism and are returning to faith and belief in God, and even a belief in Jesus. This Muslim lady has become not just a theist, she's become a Christian. So anyway, it's a great time to be announcing the good news that there is a God and that He's the God of Jesus Christ. And so we learned last week that there's two categories of the way to approach apologetics. One is evidentiary. This is going to be deductive. If you're familiar with the difference between deductive and inductive arguments, deduction is you move from the evidence to a conclusion. And inductive, you start with a hypothesis, and then you build the warrants for that hypothesis. All right. And so we're going to start with evidentiary arguments for the existence of God. This is looking at the data and drawing a conclusion from what we can observe, and really what all people can observe. All right. So the first, and these aren't all the arguments. These aren't all the evidential arguments for the existence of God, but these are some of the most powerful. I put a little asterisk on your paper, and it points you to the bottom of the page. I've drawn a lot of this from an article by William Lane Craig. You need to be familiar with William Lane Craig. He's probably my favorite apologist. He's brilliant. I only ever understand about half of what he's written. He has taken on all of these New Atheist guys in debates. So if you're a YouTube person, you can watch William Lane Craig debate these atheists, and he just makes mincemeat out of them. So it's kind of fun to watch. But this is drawn from this article, and if you get lost while I'm rolling along here, you can go back to this article, and Craig just does a great job of laying these things out. All right, so arguments for the existence of God, for the evidence. The first one is the cosmological argument. From contingency. Contingency means created things are dependent on something else. What we see is dependent on something else. It's not self-created or self-sustaining. All right. So here are the claims. Everything that exists has an explanation of its existence. All right. Everything that exists has an explanation of its existence. And here are the types of explanations. It either exists by necessity. Its nature is such that it cannot not exist. By the way, there are very few things that exist by necessity. All right? Or it exists because of some external cause. All right? It either is self-existent or its existence is owed to some other cause. That's the first claim. The second claim is if the universe has an explanation of its existence, that explanation is either an external abstraction or a mind. So let me you probably are thinking, what? So let me break that down for you. The first claim is that everything that exists has an explanation of its existence, and the universe is one of the things that exists. Can we all agree that the universe exists? Anybody want to make a claim that the universe doesn't exist? All right, again, we need to talk after the thing is, our time together is over. All right, so the universe exists, so the universe must have an explanation for its existence. Y'all follow me so far? There must be an explanation for its existence. It either is self-existent, and so here's what I want to say about that. All attempts so far to demonstrate the self-existence of the universe have failed. Okay? The universe has has a external cause. All right, it isn't self-existent. Okay, and so if it doesn't exist by necessity, the universe exists, and it doesn't exist by necessity. Therefore, it only exists because of an external cause. All right, y'all look like you at least you look like you know what I'm talking about. Okay, and so that external cause can be only one of two things. The cause can be an eternal abstraction, like a number. All right, the number 7. Okay, is just that I can't take you to a room where the original 7 is. Okay, on which all other 7s are based. Right? There's a guy printing out 7s, and so every time somebody needs to use the concept of 7, they got to go to this room and get one. You get it? It's an eternal, or it's a construct that is as old as the universe is. Okay? But it's abstract and therefore impersonal. You can't depend on a number to do anything. You do stuff to numbers, but they don't do anything. They have to be acted upon. So the external cause of the universe can't be an abstraction like a number or a law. The only other possible cause of the universe is a mind. All right? Something that can decide and act. So, the universe exists, therefore the universe has an explanation for its existence, and therefore the explanation of the universe's existence is God. Here's how we get there. If the only external cause of the universe is a mind, then it needs to be the kind of mind that can exist outside of the universe and create it. So therefore, it needs to be a mind that is eternal, the most powerful, the most wise, one having the capacity and the ability to see something through from its beginning to its end. Does anybody have any, does that sound familiar to anybody? All right, it's going to be a God with that kind of mind, or a kind of being with a mind like that is identical to God.
And he would have to exist before it happened.
And he would have to exist before existence.
Right.
Right? So, now these are logical inferences to be made. But they're powerful. They're very, and I know they're kind of nerdy and a little bit tortured. That may not be the kind of thing you can just hit somebody with in 3 minutes over coffee. But I do want you to see that these are actually serious claims. And one of the things that Craig does in his article is he shows how Richard Dawkins, one of the great leaders of New Atheism, cannot mount responses to the cosmological argument for the existence of God. So, within the cosmological argument for the existence of God is something called the Kalam cosmological. Kalam refers to the fact that this particular version of the cosmological argument is originated with Muslims. It originated in the Arab world, and Lane has taken up this argument and sharpened it a little bit, but it's just a little bit different way to make the cosmological argument. And so the argument is everything that began to exist has a cause. Everything that began to exist has a cause. Secondly, the universe began to exist. Thirdly, therefore the universe has a cause. And I say cause with a big C. And of course the question is, what sort of cause could cause the universe? The biggest kind of cause there is. A cause that, again, is powerful enough, wise enough, eternal enough, morally good enough, intentional enough to be the cause of a universe like ours. And when I say cause, let me make this is going to be maybe a challenge to some of you. The greatest empirical evidence that the universe has a cause is the Big Bang. All right? And I know in Christian circles you'll hear the Big Bang theory and everybody's like, the big scientists, saying that there was just this bang and the world came into existence. Scientists don't want the Big Bang to be true. Okay, that's one of the things that verifies it as a good theory of how the universe began. Scientists, especially atheists, they want a steady state universe. Anybody familiar with Einstein's fudge factor when he made a mistake with theory of relativity and the... Nobody. I will tell you, yes.
MC squared plus.
Yeah, that's right, there you go. Einstein's theory of relativity and Einstein's research about speed of light and that sort of thing sort of demanded a singular origin for the universe. But because of a more atheistic predisposition, they really want a universe that's self-existing, that exists forever. The idea that the universe actually has a beginning point works against the atheistic impulse, because they really want the universe to be God. They want the universe to be eternal. But what they can't get away from is the fact that the universe had a specific beginning point. And here's why this is good news for us as Christians. If there's a specific beginning point for time itself and space itself, then what does that demand? It demands a cause, okay? Demands a cause which the created material universe cannot supply the answer. Because it functions completely on a set of laws and realities that only function inside the universe. It cannot look outside of the universe. It can't see. There's a different kind of knowing and a different kind of truth that makes that knowledge available. All right? And so it's actually the fact that there is a singular, scientifically understood singular beginning. As Christians, we can debate about how long it took, all right? But we can agree there was a time when the universe was not. And once you make that claim, there was a time when the universe was not, then there's simply a demand of, well, what was going on before it? And what caused it? And if something caused it, what would be the characteristics of such a cause? And when you start to describe the characteristics of the cause of the universe, well, you get to God real quick. Because there really isn't any other explanation. Okay, y'all got me. So, those are the cosmological arguments for the existence of God. Then thirdly, the moral argument based on values and duties. Okay? It's another, the empirical evidence is the universal recognition that there are some things you should do and some things you shouldn't do. C.S. Lewis called it the oughtness of the universe. All right? And so the moral argument, there are various ways this is made, but this moral argument is based on values. And values are judgments about what is good and bad. There is a universal human impulse to look at things and to rank them in terms of their goodness and badness, to realize there are differences in value. And also that there are duties. Duties speak not of good, of good and bad, but of right and wrong. These speak of obligations. When we come to recognize that there are some things that are right and some things that are wrong, then we're obligated to do what is right. We're obligated to do what is right. One of the great discoveries of the Nuremberg trials after World War II was the courts really had to get together and come up with an argument against the Nazi claims of those individuals. Hey, we were just following orders, which is what protects military from being accused of murder and that sort of thing when they're just doing the work of war. And so it was in Nuremberg where they had to really hammer out there are some things that are always wrong no matter when or where or under what conditions. There's never an excuse. There's a set of things that are always wrong all the time, everywhere, for all time, from beginning to end. That is a massively important claim, because then you're going to have to justify that claim. So let me lay that out for you. And so would you all agree, again, that there are some things that are wrong and right? All right? Those are universally true. Okay? They're not...
I saw James Robinson in a debate with an atheist, and that's what he asked the first question: is there a right and a wrong? And they said, yes, there's a right and wrong. He says, I'm through.
Yeah.
There has to be a God for you to know there's a right.
And while that's a simple argument, it's actually very, very, very strong. I'm going to, because I can't help myself because it's such a great illustration. This is an illustration I'm using on Sunday because it's sanctity of life. But I ran across this and I'm dying to tell somebody, and so you get to hear this illustration twice. Peter Singer is I think it's Princeton. He's a medical or ethicist who makes the argument that human beings are no different from animals and don't deserve to be treated any differently from animals. And so he makes strong cases for euthanasia, for the infanticide. Parents should really be able to decide up to the age of 7, I think, if they don't like their kid. So maybe you might want to buy into that idea from time to time, but it's always wrong. So no. And you know, for a guy to make these claims, he's often not very well liked because it's a horrible thing to hear. But I mean, that's just how it is. But then it became known that his mother, who was suffering from the beginnings of Alzheimer's and had insisted, based on her son's thinking, that she be euthanized. It was her wish to be euthanized. And Peter Singer and his sister refused to do it. And he got asked about it. I think it's not a New York Times interview, but it's a New Yorker, and it's at least considered to be a good journalistic enterprise. I asked him about that, and he says, yeah, it's all kind of different when it's your mama. Yes, it is. Duh, you know. And so once again, we can parrot these claims until it comes down to actually living them out, and then we run into the same brick wall. Everybody does it. Some things, when the question is, should we kill mama? We feel like the answer is no. Okay, because the answer is no. And so as Steve has already pointed out, here's how you set up the claim. If God doesn't exist, objective morals and values do not exist. And here's what's being claimed there. The atheists respond one of two ways. Either they'll try to do the Peter Singer thing, which is to say, you're right, there are no objective, morally right. There is no objective morality. But when you ask them to live that out, they can't do it. They don't live that way. They don't behave that way. They can't get along in the world that way. Because what should the world look like if there is nothing that is objectively right and wrong? Yeah. Just a hellscape. Do what you want. Well, that might hurt somebody else. Who cares? So either it cannot be lived out, or they'll say, God doesn't exist, but universal morals do. And then you ask them to ground that claim. Tell me how it is that there are universals, and they'll do the utilitarianism, what works. They'll do some kind of a social agreement. Everybody agrees that something is right, but that falls apart with Nazism. Everybody agreed in Germany that killing the Jews was the right thing to do. When you ask them to ground the claim that some things are always true, they can't do it. They can't do it in a satisfactory way, and they cannot do it in a way that sufficiently displaces the fact that you need an ultimate lawgiver. It needs to be grounded in a mind that can establish and reveal these laws, and also enforce them and hold people accountable to them. All right. So if there is no God, if God does not exist, objective morals and values do not exist. But objective morals and values do exist. Everybody agrees that objective morals and values do exist, and so the only conclusion you can make is that it inverts the first claim. If God does exist, or if God doesn't exist, objective moral values don't exist, but if objective morals and values do exist, then God exists. All right? We'll just keep rolling because I got a lot of ground to cover. Then there's what's called the teleological argument. Teleology has to do with the purposes of things, their ultimate design, and so there's where these arguments for design come in. They're broken down really into two categories: the cosmological design. If you've heard about the fine-tuning of the universe or the anthropic principle, these are other ways to talk about cosmological design. And I have a little illustration there for you, and I'll lay that for you. One piece of evidence of the appearance of design in the universe, and this tends to be from an astrophysical level. All right, this is people who talk about astrophysics down to quantum mechanics and that sort of thing. And so here's one point of data. There's something called the low entropy condition of the universe. It's a set of principles that hold the universe together and control its expansion. One of the things that scientists have observed is that the universe, it's one of the things that proves an original point in the beginning of the universe is that the universe is expanding outward in every direction. Okay, and so if it's expanding outward in every direction, what does that mean? It means it's moving away from a single central point. But it has to be expanding at precisely the speed that it is. If it's expanding any faster or slower, it's faster, the universe, everything would just break apart. If it's proceeding any slower, the universe would collapse back into itself. Okay, and so there are several universal constants that make that low entropy condition possible, and the chances of that set of low entropy conditions occurring by accident, the chances of it occurring are 1 in 10 to the 123rd power. So that's 10 with 123 zeros behind it. You know what another word for 10 to the 101 and 10 to the 123 is? Another word? Never. That's another word. Never. Not gonna happen. Not possible. So totally and utterly unlikely that it isn't worth talking about. And it is insufficient to explain that condition. And here's the deal. If time permitted, I could spend 4 more hours laying out for you condition after condition after condition of the fine-tuning of the universe, that if you move things just a tiny little bit, you move the earth a little bit closer to the sun, life can't exist. You move it a little bit further away, life can't exist. You change the nature of the molten lava under the Earth's surface and the way that it spins. You don't get a magnetic field that holds an atmosphere on that allows us to breathe. And on and on. If Jupiter isn't where Jupiter is like the liver of the solar system. It's so huge that it has a pretty significant gravitational pull of its own, and it's what sucks asteroids and other debris floating through that would smash into the Earth. It's what sucks that out and away from us. You move Jupiter out of the way, you don't get life on Earth. And the list goes on and on and on and on. And so when you compound all of those conditions, and the unlikelihood of all those conditions, the only rational conclusion to reach is design. Is somebody intended for it to be this way so that life could exist. And so you have cosmological design, and then you have biological design. This is really, if you've heard of intelligent design, this is Michael Behe, Stephen Meyer. I would really encourage you, if you like to watch little YouTube videos, just search in YouTube, intelligent design or Stephen Meyer. It'll just bless your soul if you're kind of interested in some of this stuff, because they're brilliant. And they just lay out these things that demonstrate design. One area is DNA. Real quickly, the DNA and the sort of the discovery of the human genome is late 50s into the 60s. A realization of the nature of the code, genetic code comes in, and then decoding the genome, all of that is happening through the 60s and 70s and into the 80s. One of the things that was discovered about DNA is that double helix snake-looking thing is on the inside of the DNA there are four and only four and always four nucleotides that have to be in a certain combination in order to produce what will become the proteins that are responsible for cells and everything else. And they have to be in particular combinations to produce particular kinds of proteins in just a particular kind of way in order for there to be cells, cell function, and life. The best way to describe the ordering of those bits well, the best way to describe it is data. Like a combination on a combination lock. You ever have one of those bike locks and have the little numbers that you click? Y'all help me out here. Y'all know what I'm talking about? Okay. And it can have 3 or 4 rows of those. But you had to have the number across the front exactly. You move one number on one of the rings, just one, and the lock won't open. It has to be precise. And so when you think about if you've got, we'll just think of the DNA as a bicycle combination lock that has 4 rows, 4 tumblers, there we go, y'all have that vocabulary, 4 tumblers with 10 numbers apiece. I can't do the math, but when you think about 4 tumblers and 10 numbers, the probability to guess the number that's going to open that lock, the probability is outrageous. That's the same kind of probability to get just the exact protein that you need at the proper time in proper cells. And then you multiply that across all the different kinds of cells, all the different kinds of amino acids and proteins that you need. It's back to that same kind of number, 1 in 10 to the 23rd power, 123rd power kind of probability. The much better explanation is that, hey, when you see information, and the best way to describe DNA is that it's information. When you see information, this is what Stephen Meyer really demonstrates. When you see information, it implies a mind. When you're walking along in the forest and you see a piece of paper on the ground with an announcement written on it, you don't go, what a coincidence that ink and paper would leak out of these trees and come together and make an announcement about our Sunday school fellowship. Is that the best guess about how that came together, or would its existence imply someone wrote this? Someone intended to communicate information that would cause something to happen. That's the best explanation. The best explanation for the existence of the kind of life that we see is it implies a mind. All right? And so, I only made part of the argument in your notes there. But I'll make the argument real quick. The life-supporting universe is designed. The life-supporting universe exists. Sorry, the life-supporting universe exists. Its existence implies a mind. And the only mind capable of generating such a life-supporting universe is the mind of God. So that's, again, you see the similarities of all of these arguments. Then the ontological argument. I just want you to know this word. I can only remember what the ontological argument is for about 15 minutes, then it falls back out of my brain. Okay? Really smart people going all the way back to a man called Anselm of Canterbury make this argument. It argues from the possibility of the existence of the greatest possible being to its actuality. Now, what I want you to do is just remember that sentence and then say it to somebody who thinks they're really smart, and then walk away. It's a finely tuned argument that's based on possible worlds and the nature of being, and it's really complex, but it is often regarded among philosophers as a really strong argument for God. Unfortunately, I have trouble understanding how it really works. And then the transcendental argument. This is one that is somewhat new, and I think is a launch pad for some new dimensions in apologetics. All right, it goes like this: if God does not exist, epistemological realities like logic, morals, aesthetics, mathematics, and science do not exist. Okay, so let me stop there. Epistemological means the nature of how we know things. So one of the things that philosophers think about is how you actually know what you know. What is the nature of knowledge? How is it remembered? What's knowledge made out of? And since the Enlightenment, philosophers have had real trouble grounding things that don't exist in the material world, like numbers, logical principles like the law of non-contradiction, aesthetic judgments like the fact that we can look at something and say it's beautiful, and lots of people will look at the same thing and say that's beautiful. Well, what does beautiful mean? And where is beautiful? And is there a recipe for beautiful? And so that really came apart with David Hume, and it collapsed into skepticism. And it's what has led to postmodernism and the idea that all of these epistemological judgments really are just subjective. And we can't be sure that what we know is true. We can't be sure that the ideas and contents of our mind are actually true. And so it just collapses into skepticism and into relativism. Except that we know that logic works. You ever try to deal with someone who couldn't follow logic? That's not that fun, okay? We can't relate to each other if there aren't these epistemological realities. We can't do math. The fact that we can build buildings and write symphonies, etc., means these things are real. But when you ask an atheist to justify the reality of those epistemological realities like logic, they can't do it. So one runs into the same problem. They can acknowledge they exist, but they can't provide a sufficient explanation for the basis of their existence. And so, because such reality exists, therefore God exists. And here's what that means. The only conclusion to draw, if those realities exist, is that God has made our minds, and has made our minds in such a way that there is a correlation between how our minds work and how the reality outside of our mind works. There's a correspondence between them. And that really was the basis for the whole scientific endeavor, is that the world is intelligible, the world is understandable. And what Newton and others who were believers in God, they said God actually made the world that way. The God that made our mind and the God that made the world is the same God. And that's why our judgments about the world are real, because there's a God with a mind who is the creator and sustainer of the correlation between what we think and how the world works. Okay? So
that's the reason we were able to go to the moon, because these laws of physics, the laws of thermodynamics, the laws of kinematics, the laws of dynamics, they exist and they stay the same, and the gravity stays the same, and so we can calculate what it was necessary to do it in return.
Absolutely. And so and they are so reliable that 3 guys got inside of a rocket and let us blow them up there. Okay? If the laws of thermodynamics only worked on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm not getting in the rocket anyway, but nobody's getting in the rocket, okay? And so they're so reliable that we moment by moment willingly entrust our lives. We're sitting in a building that was designed by people who used these epistemological realities so that we have a space to eat that's not going to fall down on our heads. And so, there clearly exists, so much so that it got easy for atheistic types to say, of course, we don't need God to explain it. But when we finally started to push and say, well, if you don't need God to explain it, fine, give me your explanation. After a couple of centuries, they haven't been able to do it in a sufficient way. And really, the transcendental, the reason the word transcendental is used is there are ideas outside of ourselves that transcend us, that are real and observable. Every time they try to give an atheistic explanation of these things, they had to refer to the things in their explanation. When you were in school and your teacher said, give me the definition of fire truck, and you said, well, it's a truck that goes to put out fires. Your teacher would say that's not you're using the word in the definition. It's circular, viciously circular in philosophical terms. Because an atheist can only use the contents that are already in the material world to explain eternally existing, always true forever things, they don't have any resources to do so. And so the only thing left, again gloriously, is that there is a mind that's big enough and powerful enough to bring those things into existence and sustain them. All right, so those are all arguments from looking at data and then making inferences from the data that all of us can agree on. But another approach to making arguments are presuppositional arguments for the existence of God. Here's what presuppositional arguments are doing: is they're actually saying to the atheist, we actually share the presuppositions, but you're suppressing the fact that we actually share these beliefs. Because if you stipulate to them, you would have to quit being an atheist and you'd have to start being a Christian. I borrow this idea from some different philosophers who are really relying on Romans chapter 1. This is also going to show up in my sermon on Sunday. Romans 1 says, everybody knows that God exists. And how do they know? How does Paul describe how it is that everyone knows that God exists? They can look around and make an inference. I didn't make this. No human beings I know made this. So something superhuman and supernatural made this. And this person must have been supernal. And it would take them past the gods of Olympus that are capricious and sinful and you can't count on them. And you keep going up in that rank or that hierarchy of goodness, you have to get to the one true living God. And so what Paul says is, everybody knows there's a God. Everybody knows there must be a God. But sinful humanity suppresses that truth in unrighteousness. They don't want for there to be a God. And why would people not want for God to exist? They want to do whatever they want to do. There's a big motivation for atheism. What's the big motivation for atheism? Do whatever I want. Not accountable to anyone. That is fantastic in the short term. That's a fantastic short-term strategy. But it's death after about 15 minutes because the world around you collapses. Right? Everybody's trying to make that game work. Okay? But they know that it's not true, and so they work hard and they behave sinfully, they suppress that truth, and then what happens is it creates this spiral of lies and they tumble downwards. Their foolish hearts are darkened, and so what we are really seeing before us in many ways in Western culture is the world is going mad. The world is going mad. Did you know that today in California they debated outlawing football for everybody 12 years old and under? So nobody 12 years old and under. We don't want the children getting hurt. We will give the children puberty blockers without parental consent. We don't want them to hurt their little heads with playing the game children have been playing for a century and a half. Only
only a society going insane can act that way and think that way. And it is a great, bright, blinking, shining light that science does not work to explain what is going on. It's insufficient to account for us and what our hearts need and how to get along in the world and how to keep from killing each other, right? And so, and people, and what a presuppositional argument says, and people know it. And the only reason they pronounce something different is because they're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. And so this approach to apologetics just sort of says, I know you say you don't believe in God, but you actually act like you do most of the time. Or I can point to all of these places where you live out a morality that you don't understand because you know that it's the right thing to do. Okay? And so these are shared presuppositions that your opponent is suppressing. All right? So I'm going to go through these. Wow. I'm going to try to go through them, and I may do some of this next week, and then we're going to talk about the reliability of Scripture next week. Well, I'm going to hurry through it. At least I can get you thinking about it. All right? So the first shared presupposition is the faith presupposition. All people trust realities beyond their comprehension. In fact, everybody, mostly all day long, makes decisions based on a limited understanding of everything. Do you hop in your car with 200 horsepower, whatever it is, crank it up, and roll it into the street and trust in your life to it because you understand the specific dynamics of your internal combustion engine? I don't. Turn it on. Are you not going to use electric lights until you've mastered the concepts of the movements of electrons? I'll just be sitting in the dark all the time. We are always acting in faith. Everyone is acting in faith. And so this idea that some people are religious, that Christians are religious and atheists aren't. Atheists are just as religious as everybody else. They're just as religious as everybody else. They stipulate transcendent realities beyond them that they can't explain and don't completely understand, but will entrust their lives to. So everybody has faith. I think one of the most important things that we're going to need to do moving forward, especially with respect to what's being taught in our schools, is they'll start teaching ideology in the schools that's religious. And that's what's being done with the gender ideology. It's a religion. And we kind of decided we weren't going to be doing religion courses in our public schools. We were going to leave that to parents. But we have to stop letting the secularists say to us, you religious people need to get out of our way. They're as religious as anybody because we're all religious. We all operate in faith. And then what we have to do is we have to justify faith claims. And I will take that action any day. Let me see the person who wants to make the claim that there are 100 genders. Let's see who can justify the claim and who can't. But we can't let them say, well, but your presuppositions are religious. Discussion over. No. Your presuppositions are just as religious as mine. So the religious objection is out the window. Now you actually have to justify your religious claims. And so that's the first presupposition. And so when someone says, I don't believe in God, the next question you need to ask is, well, then what do you believe in? I heard you what you don't believe in. Now I need you to tell me what you do believe in. Well, I don't believe in anything. Justify that claim. Tell me how it is that you live it out. Tell me how that looks. And tell me how that belief system is distinct from the fundamental Western Christian reality that you seem to be living out in your life. So, presupposition of faith. Secondly, the presupposition of the hierarchy of values. We cannot help saying some things are valuable and other things. We are wired at the deepest part of ourselves not only to see differences in values, but to rank them. So that we say, this thing is more valuable than that thing. And you can infer up until you get to the question of what is the highest value. And we can actually all have that conversation. Atheist, you do believe something is of ultimate value. I ask you what it is. Well, that's a religious claim. No, it isn't. It's just a claim of reality. And we all organize ourselves into hierarchies. One of the things that we can't help wanting to know when we walk into a place is, who's in charge? Who's calling the shots around here? Where am I in the pecking order? The secularist Marxist worldview wants to flatten all that out. Everybody's going to be the same. You know how you get everybody to be the same? You kill them all. Either literally or you kill them spiritually. They're all nothing. Okay? Because the only way you can get people not to rank themselves into hierarchies is to have them stop being human. All right? And so we must know what is of value or we go bonkers. Okay? So, and everyone shares that presupposition of the hierarchy of values. Everyone sees. We can't help. We're wired to see what's at the center and what's at the edges. So we're attuned to that. We know there's a difference between what belongs at the center and what belongs at the edge. What the secular world wants to do is they want to say, let's put what's been at the edges in the center, and let's take what's been at the center and put it at the edges and see how that works. It's not going to work. All right? Some things are more important than others. Some things are at the center of things, and some things belong at the edges, and we don't need to kill the things at the edges. The other thing we observe is borders. We can't know what things are if we don't know what they aren't. But again, what secularism wants to say is anybody can be anything. You know what that also means? Anybody can be nothing. The earth was formless and void, dark. There were no boundaries. And so really part of the story that Genesis 1 is telling us that God is the God who sets boundaries. That's why all throughout the law, don't mix thread together. Don't mix seed together. Don't let your animals mix. God was reinforcing all along. We collapse back into uncreation when we can't honor the God-given borders and hierarchies that have been set in existence. We blow the world up that way. Okay? Thirdly, the moral presupposition. Everybody acts like God exists. They may say with their mouths that God doesn't exist, but they act like it. Because to really act out an existence with no moral absolutes, you have to lock those people up. They're sociopaths. All right? Fourthly, the narrative presupposition. Science and Western civilization, for sure, rests on the biblical narrative. It is simply undeniable that our language, our value system, what holds our culture together and what's made it the greatest culture in the history of civilization, it rests on top of the biblical revelation. The words that we actually use and the concepts that populate our minds to be able to talk rests on the universality and unsurpassability of the Bible. Every story we tell that's worth watching is a redemption story. And so here's what sits inside of this narrative. It's a story. And I don't mean it's a story and not real. I mean it's a story in that we exist in a story. Nothing makes sense unless we know what was at the beginning, and what was at the middle, and then how did it end. That's right. When you get home and your wife says, "What did you do today?" They want a beginning and a middle and an end. They want a story, right? If you say nothing, sometimes what we want to do, that's not satisfying to them, and it isn't true, because there isn't any condition in which nothing happened to you, because story is at the bottom. And here's why, or here's what's going on inside of that story. First of all, the pursuit of truth is good. It has a story feel to it. Stories have a pursuit. Somebody's going somewhere. And we think the best way of going is in pursuing truth, and that when truth is pursued, good things happen. Atheists believe this. You can't do science without believing that the pursuit of truth is good. But when you ask an atheist to justify the goodness of truthful pursuit, they can't do it. We share this presupposition. They just suppress that you need God to bring it on. And when you yank God out of it, then you get the kind of science that we're being given today. To science, right? Follow to science, right? Because when it's no longer the pursuit of truth no matter what, then what kind of science do you get? You get science that's bought and paid for, is mostly what you get. And when science doesn't work the right way, guess who suffers and pays? Everybody. But when you tell scientists who just in their truthful pursuit that finds that something we've been doing isn't the right thing to be doing, and you punish them and don't let them say what they need to say, and the system becomes corrupt. And so the pursuit of truth is good is not a scientific claim. It's the claim that science rests on top of, and it's a biblical claim. God, it's the claim from the get-go. The Lord said, let there be light, and there was light. And it was good. And he separated the light from the dark. He called that right. He said what was true, and it was good. And what that truth produced was good. Secondly, all people are of equal and ultimate worth. That's not a scientific claim. In fact, if you look at lots and lots and lots of people and sit and observe them scientifically, do you draw the conclusion that they're all equal? No. You draw the conclusion that they're not all equal. Some are dumb and some are smart, some are pretty and some are ugly and some are tall, some are short. And we don't. And so for most of human history, we operated under the notion that the other people didn't have as much value as I did or as my people did. It's a revealed divine truth that can only be true if there is a God who values all people equally. The only reason we have equal value is because there's somebody greater than us who's decided to value us that way. And man, once you get a society of people who are just going to treat each other as though we have equal value, we do not have equal. That's the only thing equal about us. And hooray! But when people start treating each other like that, then you get Western civilization. When you don't have that, then you have us in tribes living in huts, hitting each other over the head with rocks, which is what people were mostly doing until the gospel showed up. Okay? So, that's our story. And then everyone wants to be redeemed. It's another aspect of this narrative. We wake up every day and live out a version of this story. Something's not where it's supposed to be, and I'm not where I'm supposed to be, and I need to go from where I'm not supposed to be to where I am supposed to be. That's what you're doing all day long. And that is fundamentally a redemption story. And you work that up from, I'm supposed to be at work, right? And if I don't go, there's a problem, to I'm supposed to be with Jesus, which is the highest redemptive journey, then that's what makes life. That's what makes life worth living. And everybody believes that, including the atheist. So that's the narrative presupposition. And finally, the meaning presupposition. Some atheists will try to say that life is meaningless, but they don't behave that way. And you get back to Peter Singer. It doesn't matter. A human being dying is no more significant than a bug being smashed on the window. Well, let's go smash your mom. Hold on. We don't need to do that, because what we realize is that not only is there meaning, but meaning absolutely suffuses everything. The world is bursting with meaning and significance. And that's why we find significance all around us all the time. In each other and in the things that happen around us. And so it's universal that the meaninglessness of tyranny and nihilism is unsustainable. So let me tease that out just a little bit. The twin evils, and the twin evils that are described in Scripture are tyranny and nihilism, tyranny and anarchy. And so you get the tyranny of Egypt, or you get the anarchy of Sodom and Gomorrah. But both of them are waking nightmares. Two versions of a waking nightmare. And it's because people are not allowed to do what is meaningful. They're either told, what you do doesn't matter, just go do whatever you want. And when people do that, like those of Sodom and Gomorrah, the way the story ends is that fire falls from heaven and destroys them all. Because that's their only hope. A tyranny says, we'll tell you what's meaningful. You don't worry about meaning, we'll tell you what's meaningful. And what's meaningful for you is you're going to get a brick and stack it on top of that brick, and you're going to keep doing it until I tell you to stop or until you die. And so tyranny takes meaning away from people, and anarchy or nihilism says, good news, nothing you do matters, so just go do whatever you want. And both things destroy people because people want meaning. I think it was Dostoevsky in Letters from the Underground. I think that's it. Who says, because this was the Marxist vision, what he foresaw. If you take a society and you make sure that everybody has all the food they want and all the warm clothes and home, and all they're left with is just to propagate the species and enjoy themselves, what will happen next is that society will rip itself apart simply to know that they're not just keys on the piano being played by forces that they don't understand. And I think that's true, right? People want to know that there is real meaning. And then here's what we've discovered about how meaning works. Maximal responsibility results in maximal meaning. The more responsibility you take, the more meaning your life has. And that's kind of paradoxical because secular society says, just do what you want, don't worry about anybody else. But we find the more we care about others and take responsibility for others, lay our lives down for others, sacrifice for others, the more meaning comes into our life. Would you agree with me? Yeah. You wouldn't think so. And it actually is a supernatural reality that's been built into the structure of creation by the Creator. We suppress that truth because we're afraid to take responsibility and we don't think we can come through, etc., etc., etc. But it doesn't change the fact that everybody knows that what makes life worth living is pursuing what matters, sacrificing things for it, so that others' lives can be made better. That's what people know in the deepest part of who they are, unless they're sociopaths, or unless they wreck their souls so badly that they're not functioning right anymore. Okay, I'm starting to preach, so I'm laying this plane. From both of these angles, what I hope that you've seen tonight is there is an ever-flowing, mighty stream of warrant for belief in the existence of God. And we need to step towards the questions of a culture that's falling apart. And they act sometimes like they don't want the truth, but they need it, and they really know they do. So let's get armed and equipped and take this good news that's an abundant supply to those who need to hear it. All right, let me pray for you. Unless you have questions, Steve, you got a thought?
Just a thought. The pursuit of truth is good, so there's different ways to get to different ideas that people have. But there is a certain good way. There is a certain truth that exists no matter what. And there's a certain life that leads to. And all of that, a way and a truth and a life, is in one person that said he was.
That's right. As you move up the chain of value, you end up seeing the glory of God in the face of Christ. That's just who's up there. If those scientists were able to climb all the way back to the beginning of the universe and peer over that ultimate horizon to what was before, who are they going to see? It's going to be Jesus is going to go, hello! Been here the whole time. Been waiting for you guys. It took you a long time to get here. That's who's back there. The glory of God in the face of Christ. Everything was made for him and through him. And everything has its meaning and its being in him. That's not just simply a Christian claim. And that's what we got to get. is that's a fundamental claim. Now the Buddhists would say, well, I don't believe that. Then you tell me we're going to take Jesus or we're going to take Buddha and we're going to have them compete against each other. And we'll fight. It's not even a close competition. That's where we got to get. We've been bullied and tricked, and frankly, sometimes we've been lazy to take the bait of saying that Christian ideas or Christian beliefs are sort of to be locked inside of the church and locked behind this firewall of religious belief. But we're only ever talking about big T truth. The big T truth that all the rest of the little T truths sit on top of. And our claim is the universal claim that Jesus is the thing that everything else sits on top of. And good arguments can be made for that fact. All right. Y'all been gracious to let me take you over time, so let me pray, and I'll let you be dismissed. God, we love you. We thank you again for making yourself known to us. We wouldn't know anything about you if you hadn't made yourself known to us. Lord, but we recognize that all of the created order reverberates with your knowledge, and the reason that we don't know it is because we suppressed it. We thank you, God, through the grace of the gospel, you're able to break through our rebellion and hostility towards you. And we're also reminded that people who don't believe you are people simply who are trapped and rebellious and in the same way we were. And we were that way until someone shared the good news with us. And so, God, help us not to be cowards, and help us not to be fall into the trap of just giving up, but instead with courage and hope. Help us to take this news that's very good and is very true to people who need to hear it. I ask these things in Jesus' name.